So there are various options in considering when you're buying a property, where to house it. So basically it could be firstly in your own name, it could be a joint property, so held between two people or even more people. When I say people, I mean natural people, so sort of in the legal terms it's normally defined as natural persons. And then there are legal entities, a wide array of them, but kind of the most popular forms being trusts and also companies for now. There are pros and cons in each, and it really depends on one's position and lifestyle and the context within which you live to consider those different options carefully. There are also some tax considerations, so clearly there are different capital gains tax regimes governing these different forms. So one's got to also kind of consider very carefully that part. But generally kind of just talking then, sort of if I buy a house in my own name, obviously some of the pros are I'm in direct control. I get quite a big capital gains tax benefit or discount on the profit that I make out of the property, if I don't trade too frequently, of course, and it's really kind of the prime residential property that I live in. But it goes into my own balance sheet, and so in the case where I do pass away at some point, that will form part of my estate. So then one's got to consider just very carefully the implications of that estate duty, for example, and also kind of just dividing it into and going through that whole procedure of winding up my estate. Joint home, very popular, particularly for married couples to have it, and depends again on what type of marital contract would exist. But one can do quite easily a joint property, and then it's registered in the names, generally sort of 50% each, and in both names. The pros of that, of course, is it ties it very neatly into that relationship, and if the relationship works, then it's all good. If the relationship starts to break up, then it creates quite a lot of complexity, and there are a lot of case law around particularly kind of divorce cases and joint properties. It becomes quite complex, and quite interestingly, in the joint bonds or a joint home loan, both parties are jointly and also separately liable for paying the monthly installment. So that puts a bit of risk on both those parties, particularly if the relationship starts to kind of not be so great anymore. But the benefit is that one can transfer your own half. You can actually trade in that, and it's clearly divided on the title deed, and the home loan would also then be divided in that same share. If one of the two parties take that over, then that party would need to prove to the bank that he or she would be able to afford the full installment in taking that over. So that's sometimes the complexities that we hit when we actually get to that point for whatever reason. Joint ownership is generally quite popular, particularly for kind of new startup couples, also a combination of people buying together for rental purposes, or just kind of taking a view on property and wanting to co-share that property. So it is quite well used in South Africa. Then on trusts and companies, probably in a sort of similar structure, although Companies Act is kind of more clear than trusts are governed. But both of them are entities that would put the home or the house then into a separate estate. And so the sort of natural person can distance him or herself from that particular property, and quite useful in the case when someone passes away, so it doesn't form part of the estate, and the trust will continue after that. And if the trust or the company is well structured, then particularly the trust, the beneficiaries can continue with the use of that property for generations thereafter. And we have actually quite interesting trusts in South Africa. I'm aware of some of them are sort of set up pre-1900 and still owning quite a lot of property. So there's a lot of flexibility in that. There's also flexibility in creating the shareholder or the trustee structures and the beneficiaries in the case of a trust, and how one would actually make sure that it continues on a sustainable basis, not kind of dependent on someone's life, basically.